This mall Santa Claus was also Toronto's scariest serial killer. 67-year-old Bruce MacArthur murdered 8 men in downtown Toronto from 2010 to 2018. He was previously married with a woman and had 2 children with her, but little did they know about his double life. Many people who knew Bruce described him as sweet and outgoing, and they never imagined he would do something like this. In 2010, gay men in Toronto began going missing, and unfortunately, after some time, their cases stopped getting so much attention. Bruce first met these men on dating apps, and when he met them in person, he took their lives. He targeted marginalized men, which in this case were gay men of color. He strangled them and then dismembered their bodies and then put their body parts in planters. Bruce even took photos of his victims when they were alive and then deceased. This is one of his victims who got away after almost being murdered by Bruce. In 2018, police began discovering dismembered body parts of some of the 8 missing men on the property of one of Bruce's clients who hired him as a landscaper. And finally, in 2019, Bruce pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison.
Unusual deaths in human history. The body of a 39-year-old man was discovered hanging upside down inside the leg of a papier-mâché stegosaurus. He crawled inside head first, trying to retrieve his phone, but got trapped, causing him to experience a slow, painful death. In 2019, a Sri Lankan man was trampled to death by a wild elephant after jumping out of his car and attempting to hypnotize it. In 2016, a 10-year-old boy named Caleb Schwab was decapitated when he was ejected from his ride on Verrucht, a 168-foot-tall water slide at Schlitterbahn Water Park. In late 2019, a family in Iowa was trying to make a viral gender reveal to announce the sex of their baby. The family proceeded to fill a steel umbrella stand with gunpowder, inadvertently making a pipe bomb, causing 56-year-old Pamela Kreimeier to be hit in the head with shrapnel, killing her instantly. In 2014, a 23-year-old Indian soccer player named Peter Biak Sengzula scored a goal and did a somersault to celebrate. However, he landed awkwardly on his neck and died due to spinal cord injuries.
Here's why breaking out of prison in Germany is legal. Unlike many countries where escaping prison will give you a longer sentence, in Germany, you're actually allowed. Now you're probably wondering why. Well, the philosophy of the law says it's human nature to want to escape. So any prisoners who try to escape court like this one won't face any extra charges.
You're not real. You're not real. You're only made of moonlight.
You're so much smaller than I remember.
If you haven't seen this photo on the internet as of late, this is just moments before 12-year-old Emma Brown took her gun and used it on her father and then herself. Last September, Emma and another 12-year-old friend devised a plan to murder Emma's family and her pets and then run away to Georgia together. Shortly after this photo, she then proceeds to shoot her father in the stomach and then run toward her driveway to take her family car to meet with her friend about 230 miles away. It's believed in this moment that Emma might have panicked and then shot herself in the process. The thing that's raised a concern is, as of right now, Emma's friend, who hasn't been publicly identified, is believed to have planned the entire ordeal. One of the biggest discussions as of late is that Emma's family had no idea how her and her friend had actually met, but she has been arrested and charged with a conspiracy to commit murder. The father did end up surviving the incident, but now conversations are being struck throughout the entire internet about whether or not parents know who their children's friends are. The police have also raised concerns and reports blaming social media for this occurrence. So the question now is, was this a preventable incident?
Terrifying moments of humans in a state of pure shock. A horrific incident occurred on the 30th of July 2008 on a Greyhound bus. 22-year-old Tim McLean was unalived by a mentally insane man who then consumed parts of his body. This all happened on the bus with everyone witnessing this horrific moment. This is our reaction from one of the passengers on the bus at the time.
I was just reading a book. All of a sudden I heard a guy screaming. I turned around and the guy sitting right next beside me was standing up and stabbing another guy with a Rambo knife. And when he came and he brought the head and he looked at us and dropped the head, it was just like he was having a day at the beach.
How are you feeling now?
A little tired. I'm in shock still, I guess.
At the time of the interview, this man was experiencing pure shock.
This servant ate his employer, his families, and a lot of people in their village. Hi, my name is Ethan, and trigger warning, this is a very dark case. In 2007, citizens in a village in India were shocked when they discovered several deceased bodies of women and children. The citizens were enraged and they immediately started an investigation. After some time had went by, it was eventually evident that Pandar's servant, Surinder Kohli, was responsible. He had been R-wording minors and women and also unaliving them, but what's even crazier is he ate them as well. Jeffrey Dahmer 2.0. After mentioning that he had cooked some of the people, he was then sentenced to death. However, that was changed due to he was only found guilty for 5 out of 15 of the cases. He is now serving life in prison.
Three famous songs with terrifying backstories. Snoop Dogg's brother-in-law, Jermaine Fuller, was the singer of Peanut Butter Jelly Time. He died after an 11-hour standoff with police despite Snoop begging him to surrender. 15-year-old Jeremy Dell shot himself in the head in front of an entire class of 30 kids. His classmates felt extremely guilty for not befriending him, and his death inspired the song Jeremy by Pearl Jam. Doc Pomus of the Drifters wrote "Save the Last Dance for Me" because he was in a wheelchair due to polio and wasn't able to dance with his wife. At the wedding, he watched his friends dance with her and went home later to write the song. I've added these songs as well as many others to a playlist, and trust me, it's much different listening when you know the dark truth.
Did you know that Yellow Jackets is inspired by 2 true stories? The first one is the Donner Party. In April 1876, a group of about 87 people set out on a journey from Illinois to California. Instead of the Oregon Trail, they decided to use a shorter, untested route. By the time they were crossing the Sierra Nevada mountain range, they were low on food and supplies. And between the rough terrain and the accumulating snow, they were stranded by October. A diary kept by Patrick Breen detailed the weeks to come. As members of their party succumbed to the cold, illness, or starvation, they ended up resorting to cannibalism. When a search party arrived to help them in the spring of 1877, they found that over half the Donner Party had died, and as many as 21 had been eaten. After their rescue, the Donner Party survivors became famous, then infamous. And while some denied the cannibalism stories, at least 8 survivors admitted to eating human flesh. Let me know if you guys want to hear the other story that inspired the show.
So Annabelle is actually based on a true story.
Isn't it that Raggedy Ann looking one? I feel like I've seen pictures of like a side-by-side with the 2 dolls.
So Donna and Angie are mother and daughter. Donna got her daughter Angie a doll. Shortly after she got her the doll, they started noticing really weird stuff with the doll, right? So the doll would move a little bit. Not like as they're looking at it, oh, the leg is in a new position or the arm is in a new position, and they were always just oh, that's just gravity. Then the doll started moving locations throughout the house. Right? And then they started finding handwritten notes on this really old parchment paper that nobody in the house had. It's from forever ago. One night the doll is found with blood pouring out of her hand. Look, this is crazy. You can't make this up. Pouring out of her hands and chest, right? Something's not adding up. So they did the first thing they thought to do was, we're gonna call a medium. So when the medium came, it was what she told them terrified them, and it's honestly sending chills down my spine as I'm about to tell you it. The median said,
"This daycare worker is why many Americans choose to not send their kids to daycare." Hi, my name is Ethan, and trigger warning, this is a dark case. In June of 2018, a 1-year-old in Jessica Cherry's care allegedly fell from a chair, hit her head, and suffered extensive bruising and skull fracture. Fast forward 2 years later, another 2-year-old was found deceased in Jessica's playpen in her home. Jessica immediately called 911, and the 2-year-old was transported to Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters and was pronounced deceased. The pathologist who performed the autopsy on the 2-year-old later declared that she was potentially smothered, and that is how she passed away. They also saw that the child had blunt force injuries as well. Jessica was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter in August of 2022, and on March 17th of this year, she was sentenced to 10 years in prison.
Does a photo like this make you feel uncomfortable? Or something like this? This phenomenon is known as the Uncanny Valley. Introduced by Masahiro Mori in the 1970s, the Uncanny Valley refers to a phenomenon where our brains can register that something is very close to human, but we're also aware that something's not quite right. It's the in-between, where we can process that something looks like a person, but it's not a person, and it causes feelings of distress. Believed to be an evolutionary mechanism, which is also not exclusive to just humans, the Uncanny Valley is where we perceive these things to be a threat or not of us, and it can cause feelings of panic. One of the most well-known modern examples of this was actually an early test screening of Shrek in 2000, where Fiona was rendered as very hyper-realistic. So realistic that it surpassed the threshold of comfort in cartoon and moved into the Uncanny Valley. Children actually became so panicked at this screening, they were reported to be crying at the movie anytime she came on the screen. The entire film had to be halted and she was re-rendered. I'm not sure if this was the actual earliest version of Fiona that made it to the screening, but to put this in context, the one that made it to worldwide theaters is right above. But I did happen to find this monster from some of the early test footage of Shrek. The Uncanny Valley is still a widely unstudied phenomenon, but it continues to become more and more pervasive in entertainment as well as our modern animation.
This is one of the most horrific things I've ever heard of happening to a person. So senseless, so meaningless. This is Randy Cook, and he's an Uber Eats delivery driver. He's a delivery driver in Florida. Sadly, he was. This one hits so close to home for me because I deliver DoorDash and have for the last year, and I'm going to tell you what I'm about to say is literally my worst fear. So he was on his last delivery of the night. It was 7 p.m. when he texted his wife that he was going to hit this one last delivery and then come home. Sadly, he didn't come home. At 7:48, his wife texted him and there was no response. So she contacted the authorities. After 48 hours of him not returning home, the sheriffs got involved. They contacted Uber Eats and found out his location and the last address that he was at. So they went over there and knocked on the door. They didn't see anything suspicious, so they left. The thing is, this last delivery was less than a mile from his own house. The neighbor's video surveillance captured Randy on the delivery walking up the driveway, and then the surveillance camera just cuts off. But then something horrible happens. The next day's surveillance camera shows somebody walking out with several trash bags. Deputies checked those trash bags, and they had human remains inside. His wife, Kathy, had told authorities that she knew something horrible had happened to her husband. Something horrible definitely happened. His dismembered body was found in those trash cans, inside of the trash bags. Why? Why take someone's life so senselessly? They're delivering food to your house to make money for their family. Like, what is wrong with this world? And why are there so many sick people in it? Comment. Let me know what you think. This is horrible. And honestly, I don't even want to deliver for DoorDash anymore. And yes, our GPS shows our location, but that's not going to stop you from being put in trash bags. I personally think these apps need to do better.
So I always thought no one ever dies at Disney. Like, even if something horrible happens, they get the person off the park so they can always say that no one's ever died there. But then I found out not only is that not true, but a law firm has compiled all of the incidents. I'm going to share a few of them with you, but if you're interested in stories like this, make sure you follow the podcast because tonight's episode's just going to be these stories. So 2 of the park's worst accidents have both happened on the Matterhorn ride. One of them being a woman named Dolly, who in 1984 fell off of one of the back of the sleds onto the rails. At the time, these gondolas used to go into the rides, and so there was actually a family that watched her fall off onto the track. And so the family also saw as there was another car racing towards Dolly. The dad actually screamed at his daughters to cover their eyes, which was for the best because Dolly got hit hard. She got hit so hard that when EMTs arrived on the scene and were going up into the ride, there were park attendants coming down telling them not to look. And so finally, when someone was looking at the car she was in, they noticed that her seatbelt was unbuckled. But it's never been confirmed if she unbuckled her seatbelt herself or if an attendant didn't check her seatbelt well enough and it was never buckled in the first place.
If you still use one of these things, you might want to take caution. In the mid-80s, 17-year-old Jason Finley was found deceased in his bedroom with zero evidence as to what happened. Jason was in good health, and there was no evidence in his room that would suggest there was any kind of foul play that night. It wasn't until an autopsy revealed blood in Jason's inner ear, which points to an electrical surge of some kind. And that's when the pieces of this puzzle finally started to come together. Jason happened to be on the phone while there was a bad thunderstorm that night. And all it took was for his house to be struck by lightning and that electricity to travel through his telephone wires. The girl that Jason was on the phone with also admitted to hearing a weird clicking noise, a gasp from Jason, and then silence, which that kind of makes sense. When I was a teenager, I remember thinking that this was a complete myth, but it's not. It actually has happened and claimed several lives. But thankfully, that risk has greatly reduced due to less and less people using these kinds of phones. Unless you're a cell phone user that decides to use your phone while it's charging during a power surge.
If you guys want to talk about someone with a lot of red flags, let's talk about Taylor Parker. Taylor was recently sentenced to death for the October 2020 murder of Reagan Hancock. Taylor stabbed Reagan 100 times for the sole purpose of stealing her unborn baby. Reagan was 35 weeks pregnant, and Taylor needed a baby after faking her own pregnancy for months. Taylor lived in Texas with her boyfriend, Wade Griffin. Taylor already had 2 children, but got a hysterectomy back in 2015, which prevented her from having any more kids. Well, her boyfriend, Wade, didn't know that. Taylor never told him. Wade said that their relationship was an emotional roller coaster. He said that Taylor always lied. Wade said that their relationship was getting pretty rocky when Taylor announced in January of 2020 that she was pregnant. Of course, she wasn't. She faked pregnancy tests and reused old sonogram photos from her previous pregnancies. Remember at the beginning of the video when I said the thing about the red flags? Well, raise your hand when you hear one. People were really starting to grow suspicious about Taylor's pregnancy, but I don't think anyone could have imagined what she was about to do next. Taylor was friends with a 21-year-old named Reagan Hancock. Reagan was pregnant and she already had a 3-year-old daughter. In October of 2020, Taylor would go over to Reagan's home and she would beat and then stab her 100 times. Taylor would then cut Reagan's baby out of her stomach. Taylor hopped in her car and started driving with the newborn, but she was soon pulled over by a police officer because she was driving erratically. That's when the officer noticed a newborn baby in her lap with the umbilical cord still attached. The officer rushed the 2 to the hospital, and sadly, the baby was pronounced dead. The hospital staff grew really suspicious when Taylor refused to be checked out by the nurses. It didn't take them long to arrest her and charge her with first-degree murder and kidnapping. Taylor's trial began in the fall of 2022. It took the jury an hour to deliberate and find Taylor guilty of capital murder. Taylor Parker has been sentenced to death. Have you guys heard about the men who went fishing and then vanished for 14 months? On November 17, 2012, 36-year-old Salvador Abarenga and 22-year-old Ezekiel Cordova left the coast of Mexico in a boat for a 2-day fishing trip. Both men were aware that there was a storm on the way, but they went anyways because Salvador claimed that he had experienced fishing in these conditions. As both men were finishing up with their fishing trip, they began to make their way back to the shore, but the waves were so big that it flooded their engine and it stopped working, so their boat began to float into the Pacific Ocean. The storm was so aggressive that it shook the boat and caused their fish to be thrown overboard, as well as their net and all their tools. An entire week went by without both men drinking water until finally it rained and they were able to quench their thirst. They went days without eating, drinking water, and with the severe heat, it all caused hallucinations. In order to survive, Salvador caught turtles, sharks, and birds with his hands, and they also drank turtle blood for energy. 6 to 10 weeks go by, and on this day, both men catch 2 birds each to eat, and when Ezekiel starts eating his bird, he becomes really sick and starts to throw up, and that's when Salvador cuts open the bird and he finds a yellow poisonous snake. After that traumatic incident, Ezekiel refused to eat any more raw meat because he feared getting sick again. Eventually, Ezekiel passed away from starvation, and Salvador didn't realize that he was speaking to a corpse until almost a week later. Salvador continued his journey alone in the ocean for an entire year. But on January 29, 2014, his boat had drifted 6,000 miles at this point and he landed on the shore of Marshall Island. Salvador was finally saved, making him the longest a person has survived in the ocean. But the story doesn't end there. You see, when Salvador was rescued, he did look weak and tired, but many people questioned if he really was in the ocean for over a year. Based on his appearance, Salvador was not as thin as someone would be had he been in the ocean for that long. Ezekiel's family even accused Salvador of cannibalism, and they truly think that he took the young boy's life for his own consumption. Unfortunately, we will never know what happened on that boat between both men, but what do you guys think?
Do you remember that couple that adopted an adult pretending to be a child? Well, there's a recent update. If you don't remember this story, the Barnetts were a family who already had kids and were looking to adopt. An adoption agency they'd never heard of called Christine and Michael Barnett out of the blue to tell them about Natalia Grace. This foster child had recently become available and was supposedly 6 years old and from Ukraine. Her adoptive parents now say that American doctors told them Natalia Grace is a sociopath and scammer. At her first bath time, her parents were horrified to find that the 6-year-old had a full bush. Christine also claimed that Natalia would menstruate and had no interest in children's toys. And on top of that, she was violent. They say she once poured bleach in her adoptive mom's coffee and tried to push her into an electric fence. They would also wake up in the middle of the night with Natalia standing over them. She would also threaten to stab them with knives, and these threats are corroborated by the Barnett's friends. And her previous foster family that gave her up said it was because she tried to hurt one of their children. The only records Natalia had to verify that she was a child was her Ukrainian birth certificate and a single doctor's report. And the Barnetts claimed that a bone density test showed that Natalia was at least 14. And Natalia confessed to pretending to be younger than she really was during a stay at a psychiatric unit. And I would love to see these medical records, but due to HIPAA, they're sealed. In 2012, the Barnetts changed Natalia's birth year from 2003 to 1989, changing her from an 8-year-old girl to a 22-year-old woman. They also rented her an apartment to stay in by herself, and a few months later, the Barnett family moved to Canada, leaving 8/22-year-old Natalia behind. Natalia lived off food stamps for a year before going to the police, and that's when the Barnetts were arrested and charged with neglect. Natalia's done Dr. Phil episodes, and she said that living alone was really difficult because being a little child, she didn't know how to cook or count money. And this made people sus because if she was a little child, how would she be able to survive alone for a whole year? It should be noted that Natalia now lives with a new foster family that says she's not lying about her age. Reporters located her birth mom back in Ukraine, who said in 2019 Natalia was 16, which still meant that Natalia was cutting her age in half when she was telling people that she was 8. Like I said, the Barnetts were arrested and charged, but last year Michael Barnett was acquitted by a jury after just 2 hours of deliberation. And Christine had her charges dismissed. And you may be asking, isn't this the plot of a movie? And yes, the 2009 horror film Orphan is about a family that adopts a Russian woman pretending to be a child. And Natalia came into the Barnetts' lives just a year after. So maybe Natalia or the Barnetts watched it and got inspired. Investigation Discovery is coming out with a mini-series on this, and I will definitely be watching, and let me know if you want me to talk about this more on my account.
Alright, court is in session. This is another Zodiac murder mystery. Let's start off with who is the first victim of this case, baby. Damn, during Gemini season? Damn, Geminis, y'all gotta go, baby. Season over already, damn, it just started. Fuck. Who was Gemini last seen with, baby? Because the Cancer. Okay, child. So they was last seen with Cancer. Because Cancer knew her season was next. So the bitch got jealous and said, bitch, Gemini, you gotta go, ho. Oh, okay. Already getting messy. Who was the last person that Gemini talked to or texted on the phone with? Messy Saggy, got you. Sag was kikiing with the girls, you know, on the phone and text messaging, got you. Who's gonna be the judge for this case? Because we need a judge for this case, honey. We need a judge for this case. We need to see what's going on, honey. We need to see what's going on. We need a good Virg. We need a good Virgo. Virgo's gonna get all the details. They're gonna pay attention, be like, no, girl, you did it. You can't get past me, bitch. I'm eating you up already. Go to jail. We need a lead detective. So who's the lead detective? The Scorp. Shout out to my Scorpios. You know, the Scorpios are gonna... Sneaky motherfuckers. They ain't gonna get what they need to get when they need to get that motherfucking tea. Okay? Now, who do everybody suspect it could be? Who do everybody think, like, bitch, we think it's you? Now, who's the first suspect? Leo. Leo comes after Cancer, so I see why that bitch is already mad. She like, Cancer, you thought you ate, but I'm finna eat you next, okay? Who's the second suspect in this case? Capricorn. Now, Capricorn, where the hell you came from? Y'all just want to kill just to kill, huh? And who was the third suspect in this case, honey? And oh shit, the lead detective? Bitch, what is going on? Now, who got arrested for this case? Before we figure out who did it. The Capricorn got arrested. And who knows who killed Gemini, but just not saying anything because they just not messy like that. They're like, nah, we're gonna keep the tea to ourselves. What the fuck is going on? Who did it? Who did it? Who did it? Bitch, the lead detective? What is this, an episode of Power? Like, what the fuck is going on? Like, now, who was Scorpio's accomplice? Because they had to have some type of help. Okay? Who was their accomplice?